اسألوا جند الصليب اسألوا جند التتار هل يئسنا من قتال أو كسرنا من حصار.
Who can loosely mention what happened during that time? It was thought to be the end of the world. It was thought that Yawm al-Qiyam was coming from the massacres that took place. Ibn al-Athir said, I wish my mother never gave birth to me. I wish I died before that happened, and I wish I was forgotten and out of sight before any of this ever happened.
Passing under the shade of lustrous archways, envoys reached the court of the Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim, the exalted spiritual head of all the millions of Sunni Muslims in the world. The travelers come before him with a message from the world conqueror Hulagu Khan. Talk of what the Mongol army has done to the world and those in it from the time of Genghis Khan until today may have reached your hearing. Do not try to accomplish the impossible. Destroy your ramparts, fill in your moats, and come to us. If you do not heed our advice, I shall not leave one person alive in your realm.
After a long period of hesitation, he was advised that he should write about that period in the Muslims' history, and that's what convinced him to do that. He described the catastrophe as being so big that the days are barren from giving birth to days like them. He said one wouldn't be lying if he said that the world from the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam until today hasn't been afflicted with anything similar to it.
Hulagu and a Mongol army of untold size ride west to subjugate the world on the orders of the great Khan Monka. The Caliph, having previously failed to demonstrate submission to the Khan during the Mongol war against the Order of Assassins, now dares to insult Hulagu. Young man, you have just come of age and have expectations of living forever. You think your command is absolute. For half a millennia, the House of Abbas, uncle to the Prophet Muhammad, has ruled over Baghdad. The walls are high and strong, the skyline made splendid by mosques and minarets, from which the faithful are called to praise Allah.
He even said it's unheard of. And he said history didn't document anything close to it. And among what he said is, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant victory to Islam and Muslims, as those who help give victory no longer exist. Similar to our situation today.
The fate of all rests in the hands of a man deemed weak, a caliph more disposed to carnal indulgence and treasure counting than to governance or battle. He revels in the deeds of his forebears, and he tells Hulagu Khan, every monarch who has attacked the Abbasid dynasty in Baghdad has met a sad doom. The foundation of this palace is extremely strong and will last until doomsday. Hulagu replies, I shall bring you down miserably into the jaws of a lion.
Many in khutab, in articles, and even in books, mistakenly think that Ibn al-Athir was talking about the Tatar invading Baghdad. That's wrong. What the Tatar did when they invaded Baghdad was much worse than anything Ibn al-Athir saw or documented. Ibn al-Athir died before the Tatar even invaded Baghdad.
Tens of thousands of Mongol marauders ride to take the eastern mountains and the adjacent lands. The Christian Mongol general Kit Buka sees to it that the towns and people who waver in their surrender are reduced to smoke and ash. As they press onward, Hulagu receives an offer from the Caliph, a considerable payment if the Mongols will turn back. Hulagu remarks, since we have come all this way, how can we turn back without having seen the Caliph? Al-Mustasim is easily swayed by the words of his divided court, and the Caliph's men resort now to threats, declaring that if Hulagu turns back immediately, the Caliph may yet decide to spare the Mongols. Hulagu laughs. What do I have to worry from the Caliph and his troops?
When Ibn al-Athir was describing some of the massacres that went on, little did he know that the horrific massacres he documented, the ones he didn't want to write about, the ones he considered unprecedented in history, those were mere introductions to something much bigger. He didn't know of it because Ibn al-Athir died 630 years after the Hijrah. The Mongol and the Tatar continued invading Muslim lands after his death. They invaded Baghdad 26 years after his death, 656 years after the Hijrah. All those statements, I wish I died before this. I wish I was forgotten. Who wants to write an obituary about Islam and Muslims? All that was before, much before they entered Baghdad.
The soldiers of the Caliph will not permit the Mongols to reach the walls of their city. They find a Mongol division some miles away. The Mongols flee and the Abbasid soldiers roar in triumph as they pick off a few of the invaders and collect their heads. But the retreat is only a bluff to draw the Abbasid troops out. The Mongols rupture dikes and flood the plain behind their pursuers. Then the fabled horse archers of the Khan ride after the Abbasid soldiers, cutting them down with arrows and driving the others into the water to drown. The Mongols pick over the battlefield, collecting gifts to send to Hulagu, 12,000 Abbasid ears. The Dawadar rides back to Baghdad in haste. The caliphs of old would have spirited up all the distant armies of Sunni Islam to the aid of the city, but the throne no longer possesses such command.
What Ibn al-Athir didn't know was that he was documenting a small portion of what they're going to do. When the Mughal invaded Baghdad, it was estimated they killed 2 million Muslims. The few who survived the massacres died from plagues that were caused by hilltops of bodies. When they entered Baghdad, they continued killing for 40 days, non-stop, taking the Muslimat as slaves.
Defenses are ill-prepared. Allies have not come. Over 100,000 Mongols now approach the city from every side. The din of their march and their horrible shouts builds like a rising tide before the great house of Abbas. Paths out are blocked. Hulagu Khan means to spare none, and the lonely walls of Baghdad must now bear his fury. The Mongols entrap the city with their own walls and a ditch.
Our ummah went through much worse than what we're going through today. Aside from the killing, they burnt Bayt al-Hikmah, one of the biggest historic libraries back then, and they destroyed other libraries, and they dumped the books into Nahar Dijla. They dumped the books into the Tigris River, to the point that the river changed colors. It turned black from the ink of the books. A soldier would cross from one side of the Tigris River onto the other side over the books. They made a bridge out of the books to cross from one side to the other.
And on January 29th of the year 1258, the storm begins. Great stones pound the walls and streets. Day and night the Mongols charge against the gates. People wail and stagger about to the sound of their wretched fate. The frantic caliph attempts belated negotiations. Hulagu rejects them. Catapults bring down a strong tower on the eastern side, and the stirring sea of Mongols flows over the high walls. In the thousands, they sweep over the ramparts, killing all the garrison they find. Joining them are some thousands of their subject Christian troops from Armenia and Georgia, eager to join the cause against their Islamic foes. As Mongols pace along the city walls, throngs of refugees pack onto boats, and the Dawatdar joins their escape, only to look out and see the Mongols have built bridges over the river. They launch stones and incendiary projectiles at the boats attempting to leave. They capture 3 vessels and kill everyone aboard.
They turned the masajid into stables and barns for their horses. When you read about that era, you get astonished and your jaw drops. They wondered back then, would Islam ever make a comeback? Or is it the end of the world?
The Dawatdar turns back to the city, and the Caliph sends him to personally submit to Hulagu. The weary Abbasid soldiers follow. Thousands of warriors cast down their weapons, joined by hopeful civilians in peaceful submission. The Mongols divide them up, lead them from the city, and kill all of them. The heads of the Dawatdar and 2 other officials are sent to their friend, the governor of Mosul, a reminder to those who have not yet submitted. The king without an army, Al-Mustasim, finally emerges to surrender, and Hulagu did not exhibit any anger, but asked after his health kindly and pleasantly. After that he said to the Caliph, "Tell the people of the city to throw down their weapons and come out so that we may make a count." The Caliph complies. He is taken prisoner, and the Mongols receive the people of Baghdad in the tens of thousands, and they pluck apart shaking families, mothers and infants, old and young. A few they spare as slaves and craftsmen. They kill the rest. Seeping hills of heads and bodies stretch like a sallow sheet over the whole plain. Then begins the long pillage and massacre of the city. To undermine civilian resistance, Hulagu had promised to spare some segments of the population, including the minority Christian and Shia Muslim communities. He holds true to this word, and he sends the Mongols house to house, street to street, to slaughter everyone else.
قتال أو كسرنا من حصار